Hey everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Startups Unedited. Today I'm joined by Ellen Rubin, who is an operating partner at Glasswing Ventures, who was an investor in a startup that I was participating in a couple years ago. And Ellen is not just a investor, she is a multi-time successful founder and has been through this story a couple times. Ellen, how are you?
Good. Nice to see you. And actually, good to see you live. I think in the past, we've kind of just chatted on the phone and stuff. So this is great.
Absolutely. Well, why don't you just tell folks a little bit about your career background? How did you become a successful entrepreneur, which is so challenging in itself? You've been able to also move in now to the venture world.
Yeah, the venture thing is a more recent thing in the past, year or so, and really loving it. And here at Glasswing, and just spending time in the Boston tech community. But most of my career has been as a founder and founder CEO. And I've spent a lot of years in the B2B enterprise infrastructure area. So, I like to say like the really nerdy part of things, where you're dealing with storage and networking and databases, data warehouses and stuff. And just enjoyed that for a very long time in terms of starting companies from scratch. So my formative years were at a company called Netezza in the data warehousing space, where I was part of the early team. And then that company went through IPO. So I was there through like before there was product all the way through to, to post IPO. And then after that, I've really been running in my own companies. So I had a company, CloudSwitch, that was acquired by Verizon in the hybrid cloud space or early cloud days. And then after that, ClearSky Data, which is a hybrid cloud storage company that was acquired by AWS. And so I did my tours of duty at Verizon and at AWS. And then I started another company called Causely in the observability space and causal AI space. So it kind of brought me a little closer to, up the stack and a little closer to the AI revolution that was literally just about to go bananas, which I'm sure we're going to talk about for the rest of this call. So about a year ago, I joined Glasswing as an operating partner, and I get to work with our portfolio companies, Reprise and other companies that you're familiar with, but also to help with, like what's the next generation of founders who are building AI native companies.
Absolutely. And shout out to the Reprise team. It was a exciting time launching that business, especially during those very early days. It's kind of my favorite stage. In some cases, it's like has the most uncertainty because you're like literally just manifesting something from nothing into existence. But it's always the most fun. I wanted to ask you, Ellen, if you're a founder out there in the trenches, a lot of us are thinking about how do we move from a nice to have, or maybe, we've all been there where it's like, oh, this is a great idea. Maybe I've talked to a couple people. I might get some signals. We never know, at least early on, if it's a false positive, right? Or folks are just being nice. But, given your experience and your success, how do you know, do you have a particular playbook that you've been able to implement that helps guide you moving from like, it's this interesting idea to this is now a must have, and as a result I can successfully commercialize?
Yeah, it's the hardest thing. And I also love that like blank piece of paper through to get the product into the market and start to scale and stuff like that. I'm very, very much of a, like we call it early and very early stage person. And it's hard because there are a couple of things that make it, beyond, it's just hard because how do you know if you're going to build something that is, both incredibly valuable and sustainable, right? Like those are challenges. But also there's the, the founders, energy, charisma, enthusiasm that can like override sometimes whether the market signals are real or not real. So you can get false positives. I've definitely had this happen. I would never claim that I am like the expert in this because I've had success and failure on this. But what I would tell you is that there's the part where you have to let go of the fact that your enthusiasm for the selling and the founder-led selling and stuff like that does not represent the repeatability of that, or the fact that beyond your first 10 customers, this is something that other people can do. And so the way around that very early on is to do, and some of this I think, is well known, but you need to be able to show that if it's somebody who is not connected to you, is absolutely cold, and all you have is a set of messaging that you can deliver, does that cause somebody to want to engage, want to have a conversation, and then move from there with velocity into, I need to get my hands on this product. How fast can I get my hands on it? And if you don't have that, but you're having lots of really great, wonderful, warm, loving conversations, that's unfortunately not very meaningful. The other piece of it too is immediately there becomes the question of, can anybody but the founder sell? And if you give it to somebody else who is trying to do it either from a BDR or an SDR thing, or if you bring in somebody who's going to be kind of your first seller, and see how hard it is for them, beyond that it's always hard. And of course, it's going to be a challenge. You have to kind of measure that as fast as you can and try to move to the commercialization of it, even if you might not be totally ready to sell yet, right? The product is probably not totally baked, or, you don't quite know what the key features are going to be, but it's that conversation, especially in enterprise. I mean, honestly, like, kind of, what's the point if you're not going to be able to have the product pull itself through, the procurement, security, vendor onboarding, and all the things that make it really, really tough. And so the risk of that is something you have to keep testing and testing and testing and testing. And if you don't have a good feeling about it, stop. Don't throw more money at it. That's not going to help. So anyway, so I don't know if any of that is rocket science, but it's incredibly hard to do as a founder.
It may be, I think, for like an individual like yourself who's been doing it for so long, and you've been immersed in the ecosystem, helping support other folks do it. So it may not seem like rocket science, but I think, like, for a lot of folks out there who are trying to figure it out, like, it is actually pretty hard to do, and to do in a way that is unbiased. As an example, I've been there so many times where I'm doing classic customer discovery. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do more customer discovery now for this XYZ venture than I've ever done in the past. And sure enough, I start to find myself leading the witness, right? And selling, as opposed to actually trying to be as unbiased as possible. And I can't tell you, like, there's a venture that I was involved with for the last couple of years, and we did probably 1,200 customer discovery calls, no joke, right, over a year and a half. Because I was like, I'm gonna, I'm
religious, like, let's go, yeah,
let's go.
And that crazy,
absolutely. And I found myself two things that were really, like, kind of like obvious in retrospect. Number one, like, a lot of those folks were, at least early on, were folks that I knew, right? So I feel like there was a percentage of them that were trying to just be like, oh yeah, great, George, that sounds cool. Yeah, I have that problem, because I'd be selling them that this problem exists.
Right. Like, it intellectually sounds good, makes sense, right?
Yeah, right. It's logical.
That's the worst thing, when people tell you, oh, that makes a lot of sense. You're like, no, but are you dying from this problem right now?
Yeah, exactly. And my co-founder and I would sit back and go, gosh, we've had, hundreds of these things. Here's the patterns. They're all very clear. Why are people not converting, right? And so, as I've kind of gone back and sort of reevaluated the things that I did, it's like, was I leading the witness? And the answer was, a lot of the time, yeah, I got caught into, like, oh, I'm going to sell. And I think this is a huge distinction, at least in my experience, from selling, once you have something ready to go, and that founder customer discovery early days, to really kind of determine. And, at the end of the day, you don't want to hear that your idea sucks, or doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah, right. The only little, like, asterisk, because of course this is so true, and this is such a fundamental thing, but the only asterisk I want to kind of make to this, discussion that we're having is, back in the early days at Netezza, which was like it was like $1 million system that had to roll into a customer data center, big iron, so you can imagine, like, the barriers to market entry and stuff. And it was already an established market with big competitors. And I remember we were doing all this discovery work, because I was identifying, like, where was the beachhead and who were we going to work with first and all this kind of stuff. And a lot of the people that we talked to were like, I hate this idea. I don't believe you. This doesn't sound real to me. And you're like, okay, but, like, let's talk about the pain and all that kind of stuff. And they totally acknowledged the pain, but they also were like, this is going to be such a big deal to make a switch like this and to physically get it in and stuff like that. And to a certain extent, we had to ignore that. So there is a little bit of that, like, you know, that you're like overcoming a lot of barriers. And so like finding the balance between you don't have happy ears, but on the other hand, you're a founder and you're going to just go through the brick wall, right? You're going to convince them that there's something here that first of all, that works to the claims that you're making, which they don't believe because they're skeptical IT people. And also because you're going to show them that it can actually solve a very specific problem that they have, which I'm sure we're going to talk more about now, you know, like this, I have a problem. I have this particular thing, like in Netezza's case, I had a query that did not complete or ran for 3 days and I could not finish it because I didn't have enough data warehousing power. Okay, well, what if you did? What if you could do 10x of that? Right. You know, those are sometimes the conversations. So there's always like the, you know, technology as magic. And then there's I got this problem and I can solve this problem for you right this second.
And that's another piece I think that in my experience has kind of created some difficulty, at least internally, and figuring this thing out in a successful way, which is that idea that you sort of alluded to, which is like, I think Steve Jobs used to say this, which is, oh, the customer doesn't know what they want. You know, we got to like be innovative and tell them and show them what they need, right? Kind of deal. And, you know, I've always been, as a salesperson, a bit hesitant, you know, to apply that, especially in B2B, because at the end of the day, I'm like, you know, I need to go and figure out what these pains are, or maybe I already know I need to show them that they have it and then go. So it was a little counterintuitive. I know in consumer, maybe you have a different experience there. So like, how do you know like that balance between, okay, we're going to listen to the insight from the market, but also we're going to be founders, like you put it, and innovate and create and invent.
Yeah, there are some of these, you know, time-honored things that, you know, you have to be disciplined about. You can kind of say, oh yeah, I got that or whatever, but you have to actually force yourself to go through a repeatable conversation. So there's the time to value conversation, right? Like from when I come in and you say, yes, I want to see this running in my environment, because, you know, more enterprisey stuff generally that people want to see it. How long does it take me to show you something that is actually meaningful and valuable to you that you couldn't do today? Right? How do I do that? And generally the goal is to try to do it with minimal effort on the part of the customer, because they're just not going to spend a lot of time on your stuff until they decide it's worth. I mean, it's a pain for them to even get it into their test environment. You know, the rules get stricter and stricter about what you can bring in and how many vendors and all that stuff. So there's that discipline of doing that and having the feeling for, I've really listened to the comment you were making earlier. I've really listened in an unbiased way to the thing that the customer says is a problem that they are struggling with right now today that they cannot solve, and that or if they solve it, it's with so much cost and time that it is not helping them, you know, through a business problem. And you come in and you say, okay, I'm going to show you that thing, right? I'm going to be very focused on that. And I'm going to show it to you, and I'm going to show it to you without you having to do a 6-month, you know, deployment process here, right? Generally, you want that to be in like days to weeks at worst. Minutes would be better, you know, like initially there's initial deployment and then there's integration with a lot of data and stuff like that. So it's okay if that takes more than 10 seconds, but you cannot have that go on for very long, because the customer will just wander off, you know, or not the boss of the customer will, or the, you know, customer's boss, you know, who's going to sign off on a check eventually will say, wait, what are you working on? Why are you doing that? So there's a lot of those factors that are really, really critical. And you have to, like, before you've gone to do that in the real world, you can walk yourself through that intellectually. What's it going to take? How hard is it going to be? What is it that I'm going to show? Because of course, the whole customer experience, you know, and UI that you can build, which now AI can just do for you. It's like, you know, it's so much better than it used to be. You can kind of say, well, what is, when they see the first things they're going to see, what are they going to see? What's going to be exciting to them? That they're going to then say, aha, this is something I need to spend more time on. And I actually want to go show it to 2 other guys. And that's, you know, I'm sure with Reprise you had that as well, which is like, okay, you know, what was the thing that they got excited about? And then they said to the other people who were sitting around them, you got to look at this.
You got to look at this. Absolutely. Right? Take action.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to your point, the aha moment was spoken about a lot in self-serve products, product-led growth kind of experiences, because you have to have it, right? You don't have the human sitting there. But I don't know. I almost feel like that aha moment in time to value in 2026 and beyond, and maybe even, you know, a little earlier, like has to exist even in your more traditional enterprise applications.
Oh, for sure. It's when we're doing diligence, it's one of the conversations that you have with the founders, which is, what is it you're going to show? because remember that there's already technology in place for the, any enterprise has a bunch of technology. They have a bunch of processes that are already there. They have human beings who are doing a lot of work in which they kind of feel like they have knowledge and expertise. Sometimes they're very protective of that. And you're going to come in and you're going to say, here, this is the thing I'm going to show you, right? And it can't just be, oh, here's a really nice broad demo of a whole bunch of different kinds of features and functionality. It just doesn't cut it. And so I think the product-led stuff has kind of moved up into, a lot of product-led companies kind of realized that they actually needed to do more traditional enterprise selling, or they moved up into larger medium to large enterprise selling after doing things that were down at more of an SMB level. And so all of that stuff came along. Right. And that's valuable. I think it's good. Why wouldn't you want to show something exciting and valuable in your first 5 minutes? Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Really why wouldn't we want the consumerization of the enterprise to be a real thing? We are consumers in our personal life. Right. So I think that's a good thing for us. One other question kind of within this topic of customer discovery and finding the right signals and these sort of things, pricing, right? There's been so many times that I've worked on products and I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm going to charge them $50. And I know that the economic, and this is like early days, right? So I know the unit economics are not there yet, but I also find, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, that even starting at let's say a number that is so far below where we need to be, ultimately to build an actual sustainable business can be a false positive. Because if someone ends up paying you, let's just say, I don't know, let's just say $20, a month or whatever for your system. And that's not going to work, but you're just kind of trying to answer the question that we've been taught, over time is like, will people even pay for this thing? Right. And so I've also found that as I've gone further down kind of the value chain and the decision-making sort of process with folks, and I get to this point where I'm like, okay, well, it's $20, and they're like, okay, yeah, I'll try that. Right. And and sometimes, that they'll actually end up paying for that. And then we end up realizing that the truth, which is they're not really that excited about it. They were willing to spend the $20, but where we need to be is, much higher. And we need them to actually be able to invest in the tool as well and deploy it and really have some skin in the game. And that's just not happening. So again, I guess my question is is there a perspective or approach that you would tell founders out there around saying maybe, hey, listen, start at a reasonable number, right? If they're not willing to pay for that, you really don't have something that is burning, enough and enough of a need that they're going to invest a decent amount of capital in.
For sure. And, remember, for me, with more infrastructure-y things, we're talking $50,000 to $100,000 at the low end, up into millions at the high end, so the numbers are non-trivial numbers, and they could be on a per seat basis, but often there's kind of just an enterprise license that you get to pretty quickly where the customer is like, no, I just don't nickel and dime me on this. I just need all this stuff. And so at a certain point, okay, so there's the very beginning and then there's after the very beginning. The very beginning, I think it's good to have some sort of a minimal charge, even for those early customers, partially just to see how hard it is to get through the procurement cycle, right? And to understand how that's going to be and who's really going to sign off. And is it, are more parties involved in the decision-making than you realized? Because of course it's always complicated, right? There's nothing. And even frankly, just getting through the initial vetting of the product by the different teams that have to say okay to it can take a long time, right? I mean, it certainly can be 60 to 90 days without blinking an eye, and it could be many, many months at larger enterprise. So you want to kind of understand what that's, how bad is that going to be? And, how can you, where are the shortcuts and what are the things you can do? And it helps you start to lay out the flow of the sales cycle, which you're going to put into whatever, CRM and training that you're going to do eventually. So you might as well get started with that immediately to sort of say the conversion from someone had an initial call and expressed interest to what's going to happen next. And then stage 2, stage 3, stage 4 of all the sales cycle, you want to at least start to think about that right from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. You don't want to bias yourself by saying, okay, well, we just, let's just assume it's going to be X or Y. You want to actually see how the reality of it is and where things get stuck, because the deals are going to get stuck initially, right? That is very possibly true. So then, you get after your initial, you've got a couple of reference accounts. These days you need to show up with a fair amount of ARR if you want to raise money. So, which I think we're going to talk about a little later, but like it's not like the velocity to revenue is like the energy around that now is very, very high. And there is a need to be able to prove that the customer is not just like, oh, this is so cool, and I can tell my boss that I'm working on an AI thing, right? Like it's got to move beyond that, because of course, otherwise easy come, easy go, right? You came in, they tried it, then, 6 months later, they're like, okay, thanks. We learned a lot. That was helpful for us. Like that's not meaningful revenue. So there's a lot of pressure to get to, even several million ARR, over in the world that I'm in, as you move kind of from like initial funding into your next round of funding.
Yeah.
So you cannot underprice in that case. That is a thing you cannot do, because you could have a handful of deals that are, at very, very low rates, to your point, like some, ridiculously low number, but it will not show the velocity of what you want. And that's a key thing that we are focused on right now, certainly as an investor, and the AI founders should be focused on that as well, right? Like this is not just about cool technology. That is not the point of this thing.
Awesome. That's one thing that I've learned over the course of my career as an entrepreneur, which is for the founders out there is such thing as bad revenue, and then it will point you in the wrong direction. And so just be cognizant of that. Just because someone's willing to pay something doesn't mean that that's the whole pie there. But I wanted to transition to the valuations that we've been seeing around AI products and the impact that AI in this latest iteration of the LLMs and generative AI has made on our entire ecosystem, right? As a startup, whether you're a founder or an investor, what are you seeing out there in terms of the impact? And a little more around kind of the context here is that, and you sort of alluded to this, right? Like the application layer, you can build software now in a matter of, gosh, in some cases, minutes, right? It's crazy, right? It's kind of going from the horse and carriage to like a teleportation device, right? Using that analogy, I love, sci-fi. But what does that do if again, you can build software now, in a matter of minutes, days, weeks, that used to take much longer, in some cases, months, years. And now you may not have the same need for these large software engineering teams. Maybe the valuations for software engineers have shifted a bit, right? Because you don't need that kind of, at least the same set of resources that you used to. So again, how is this impacting from your perspective, this entire ecosystem?
Right. So, for us at Glasswing, there are different areas that are somewhat different from each other. So, you can have like kind of classic, more, application level SaaS, models where, that what you've been describing is very true. And that the velocity to getting your initial product, prototyped and then built and stuff like that can be done. I'm seeing all these numbers where it's like, oh, it's, 4 times faster with half the number of people or something like that. It's like an 8x kind of a, thing to say. And it is true in terms of a lot of the coding and the debugging and the prototyping and all that stuff that, like the tools are really incredible and they do an amazing job. Other things that have more physical AI and more integration with hardware and, like kind of like deeper in the stack, more, platform, types of approaches where things are like a more deeply integrated set of things with underlying customers' technology, those things maybe, still need more people, and also might need more specialized knowledge and expertise and stuff like that. So it's a continuum, but I think the general point that you're making is the right one, which is, okay, so we have all of this stuff and it's moving so much faster. And, there's definitely a shift in terms of what is it that investors want to invest in, right? And so it's not enough to have really capable, smart founders who have all sorts of, brilliant ideas and can get a product to market relatively quickly and get it into the market quickly, initially. Like that's assumed. Now the real issue is what happens at that point in terms of the velocity to revenue that we were just talking about and the stickiness of the product in the customer's environment. And there there's just a huge amount of discussion about embedding in workflows, enabling some new workflows that now are AI enabled, where it used to be a lot of human manual steps along the way. Like, so much of what AI is fantastic at is kind of streamlining a lot of the stuff that SaaS didn't really fix, right? Where still you've got like manual spreadsheets and like 3 different systems and handoffs of data and missing data because it's, on like piece of paper, like things where that is still true. And, AI just kind of like sweeps through that, like a tsunami. So there's a lot of the provability of that, both that you can get to revenue very quickly, and that even if you are a first-time founder, that you're figuring this out very, very quickly. And there, techniques and tools and stuff like that that can be taught, but there's also a certain amount of just like figure it out, like get out there, start engaging with these customers, and don't do too much on the, to the earlier points, don't spend too much time, just kind of like building the product. Take what you have, get it out there, because you can change it so quickly, right? There's a lot of good, speed to the revs that you can do. But then there's when we think about this, and so some of the stuff that we are investing in is what's known as vertical AI. So it's specific to, we have things that are a little more horizontal. So Black Kite is a security platform for third-party risk, like cybersecurity risk for third parties. And there, there's like a whole flow of cybersecurity checks and balances and, other tools that are in place and stuff like that. And then we have companies like LabViva, which is like a marketplace for lab and scientific equipment, and Verizon, which is for supply chain inventory, being able to track and measure all of that. And some of these things have like really, really deep problems that they're solving, but they're solving it from end to end. Right? From like the beginning of a workflow, like when something enters into your initial, system, and then carries all the way through to validation, making sure that things are properly billed, all the way through to the end customer experience and stuff like that. And the more embedded that is, the more likely you're going to become, the next generation of platforms that are out there. Right. And that, this cuts across a lot of existing technology that are, that we've had a whole generation that it's kind of time for AI to take a new, approach to these areas. So anyway, so that, I think that's where a lot of the focus is. And like, how are the next really huge companies that are AI native getting built? They're getting built around those types of end-to-end workflow and problems. And they're not narrow point solutions, but they could be focused on a particular use case initially, and even a particular vertical.
Awesome. Ellen, thank you so much for taking the time to share your wisdom here. If, let's say, folks that are watching the show, founders out there who are building AI infrastructure or maybe vertical AI, were interested in learning more about Glasswing, what is kind of the profile of founder that you really like to kind of meet and get to know?
Right. So we're, we announced our Fund 3, which was a $203 million fund. And we're here in Boston on Newbury Street. And so we love to meet with new founders who are building things in frontier tech. Everybody's an AI company now. So, but it's using AI in the way I was just describing. And we also do a lot of investment in cybersecurity and somewhat more infrastructure types of opportunities as well. So if you're B2B, you're focused on that, you're in an early stage of seed or pre-seed, we love to do that. And we love to have people come hang out with us here.
Awesome. Well, go ahead, everyone, and follow Ellen on LinkedIn. Follow Glasswing. Some great events, great content. Of course, I'm biased, but you can just check out the content and the insights that they provide on a consistent basis, and you'll see that that it's awesome. Ellen, thank you so much for being on the show, and have a great day.
You too. My pleasure. Good talking.